Our next panel discussion is kind of a formidable challenge. Our group has the task of recognizing that while modern enterprises want and arguably need broadcast quality video, which not only needs to be secure, it has to have corporate blessing and governance as well. Allan McLennan of the PADEM Media Group, who I'm sure many of you already know, will be moderating this discussion. And he's going to be joined by three panelists: Josh Garcia of Ross Video, Jeremy Hochman of Megapixel, and streaming and security expert Unmesh Suryawanshi. Please welcome me in welcoming them.
Well, hello, everybody. I hope can you hear me okay? I can't hear myself. Great. Well, did everybody have a good lunch? As Robin said, was it tasty? I don't know about you, but it was a little humid out there, a little sticky, kind of going around it. Well, what we're here today is to talk about is basically what's been identified by numerous companies at NAB and Infocom around enterprise video. And enterprise video in this particular case, we've been talking about executions and platforms and the different type of technology tool sets that are able to make this work. But now we're going to talk about infrastructure and how all of this comes into play. One of the things that is always difficult when you mention this kind of situation is it really the next big thing? Well, the numbers support it. The numbers support it when it comes to exactly what we're going to be talking about today. And in that particular case, what I've got is some esteemed members of the panel here with me to keep me in check with how we're going to be approaching this. And what I'd like to do is make the introduction this time. And so at our far end is Unmesh. Unmesh, do you want to take us through a little bit about you?
Hello everyone, Unmesh Suroshi, based in California. I'm leading the streaming media and event technology and security infrastructure in Visa, but I'm representing on my own here. Thank you.
Okay, and Jeremy, hooray.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Hochman, founder of Megapixel. We make large format display systems and specifically focus on security and resiliency for moving high bandwidth video from input all the way to photons coming out of the pixel.
Photons. You're very impressive. Hey, Josh.
Hey everyone, I'm Josh Garcia, based in the Bay Area. I work for Ross Video on the enterprise team.
Fantastic. And so I hope everybody has an idea of what we're talking about here when it comes to the kinds of products that we're proposing that is out in the market. Well, like the major corporations, we've seen the different types of executions and the numbers of thousands of people and how we're approaching it when it comes to, different townhomes and the different things that need to be addressed by corporate interactions with their staff, and the numbers of languages that have to be also developed. But I think it's really important to kind of get an idea of what one of the large corporations are doing. So Jeremy, do you want to introduce the video that you have?
Yeah, so we'll play a video here. This is a short reel that we put together after commissioning 270 Park. For JP Morgan. So you're going to see a lot of different display surfaces. It's about 700 million pixels in a 60-story building. And what's very unique about what you'll see is that there's not a single display in that video that is a 16:9 raster. They're all different shapes and sizes, different pixel counts. And so we're leveraging a lot of broadcast technology, security, and infrastructure in that building, but it's used in kind of a non-traditional broadcast way. And I think it represents the future of what we're going to see in a lot of corporations.
Okay. Could we cue that up, please? the only thing I could imagine is if you would see those and have town hall meetings with those, right? How would you interact with those size of monitors, which are truly impressive in how you're approaching? But, let's just jump into, what do you feel the challenges are that we're facing today, Josh?
Yeah, so enterprise video is one of the most exciting verticals right now across our industry. And traditionally, enterprise video has been used as a support function. And now I see it more as a strategic business function, right? Now that we're 6 years past the pandemic, the way that corporations communicate has completely changed. So there's a lot of challenges when you take broadcast gear and put it in a corporate environment. Some of those being, AV and IT securities, IT protocols, sometimes AI layers when it comes to monitoring and alerting and things like that. But long story short, we're still looking for the reliability, scalability, resiliency, and things like that we got from the broadcast gear after generations of hard work and where we've ended up in the manufacturing side. So back to the opportunity, I think there's such a strong opportunity here to improve communication, and organizations that can communicate effectively have the upper hand and have the advantages. So so many different challenges, so many different opportunities here, but at the end of the day, it's not about selling technology, it's about helping communications within corporations and helping these corporations communicate more effectively.
That's a really nice phrase in how you're approaching that. But, let's face it, to put on a really good broadcast show of any capacity, whether it's a live sports or whether it's a contained episodic kind of programming, there's a lot of people that are involved in putting this together at any given time. Are you saying that the technology now has gotten to a point where it's so efficient that within these corporations that one or two individuals can be that production group, can be that IT group?
You see that. It comes with its own host of challenges, right? Traditionally, broadcasters have a full team. Some of these corporations have to stay nimble and flexible. We're talking multi-purpose rooms, right? We're talking being able to film a town hall or a keynote and quickly flip that space into a podcast space, right? So you need to rely on the proper technology to get the job done. But this is the way that we communicate now, right? Video is everything in enterprise. Video is the new conference room. So this is how we need to approach it, and we need to approach it well and find what works and stick with it.
So 6 years ago, we stepped into the pandemic, and all of a sudden we moved over into video with the different virtual platforms. Is that really what's kind of started this? Is like this kind of engagement that said, whoa, we can really connect with so many of our employees this way, and so consequently, let's up the game and get to a point where we're able to deliver it. Jeremy, Megapixel, what you've been putting together, is that about the timing that's took place?
Yeah, I think there's this interesting convergence that I think happened. It started for some of the more advanced deployments before the pandemic, but really the pandemic kind of supercharged a lot of it because people were very distributed. So technology and information needed to be brought to where people were rather than people going to where, a central area like this, like a theater. So it became kind of an intersection of a broadcast and an IT problem because there's this intermixing of, let's say during the pandemic, there would be an executive potentially on a stage like this in front of professional cameras, but with no audience, and then that needs to broadcast out to tens of thousands of people, maybe even millions of people. But that consumption is happening in either smaller clusters or on laptops. And so there was a bigger adoption of essentially varying quality level. And that varying quality level has increased more and more and more as bandwidth is better into homes, as bandwidth is better over cell signal. But then also the fact that people started getting comfortable connecting a laptop themselves to do a presentation rather than walking into a space that had two assistants to help you, plug something in. So I think all of these things were starting to happen around that time. But then when everybody's returning back from work, what happens is there's more emphasis now on the communal communication, regardless of whether the people are in one room or not. And so that's where I think that broadcast piece comes in because broadcast, historically has meant, from one to many, right? You broadcast out. this has now become a bi-directional information challenge, and also something that's a little bit more community building. And IT has been leveraging so much of that with all of our connected devices and things that have become more personal, whether in personal or in work lives. And so I think this convergence has really supercharged the ability to do so much of what would have taken a staff of 25 people in a broadcast studio down to one because of the technology that's leveraged.
Yeah, but what you're describing now is that and what we're talking about is that broadcasting of the content out to these huge company bases that have thousands of people, which then kind of causes me to think about how important these companies are publicly traded. They have financial backends. They're sharing of private information and confidential information. You know, some of the issues that are afoot within broadcast right now are like in authentication of content, verification. We brought it up earlier with C2PA and the different COG, systems that secure the content. Unmesh, what about the securing of the content?
That's my favorite topic. I would say traditional broadcasts, right? The problem started with the isolated environment. The challenge in the corporate business is in a sports stadium, people care about the quality. But in traditional corporate world, the IT principles are pretty standard, right? So it's easy for AV and broadcast people to tell this IT people, like, oh, this is our industry and this is how we work. But it's very difficult for an IT or security guy to know our world, because in one control room, at least we are having 50 to 70 different types of manufacturing devices, whether it's a small converter or whether it's a switcher or encoder or processors, right? So the challenge that we have in the corporate is how this 50 to 70 different manufacturer can work together and meet the standard. They are basically sitting on a same isolated environment. So if I'm having 50 different manufacturers sitting on my environment, if 49 people are meeting the standard, but if that one person who is critical in the infrastructure, if that manufacturer is not meeting the standard, guess what? We are also going to reduce the expectations from those 49 vendors, and we are pushing them back to the, again, like isolated environment. So from the security forefront, the challenge that we are seeing is C2PA credentials that you're talking about, right? I think overall AI world, we are seeing it's 2 steps ahead, and sorry to say, but broadcast and AV industry is very behind in terms of security, in terms of traditional IT. So we have to take like 2 steps back. One is how we are going to fix this isolation problem into the cloud environment. That is the first step. And the second step is if you are having a solution from isolated environment to the cloud, then you are going to adopt the AI. But to even get the isolated environment into the cloud, the challenge is the AV world, we cannot go completely cloud, right? The challenge that we can solve is by bringing the hybrid approach. And hybrid approach is if AV vendors are having 50 different solutions, each and every hardware ecosystem can also be integrated with their own cloud solution or a different cloud solution. That's how we are going to tie up with the API integration, for an example. So now we are going to focus on our productivity. If we are going to solve this problem from isolation to the cloud, that's where the security comes in, right? So when people are going to build their hardware ecosystem, it's very difficult to patch AV hardware because traditional hardware, Windows or Mac, right? It's only 2 components, hardware and software. If you fix the hardware, if you fix the software vulnerability, guess what? You are meeting the standard. But in AV world, most of our ecosystem is sitting on embedded, right? Embedded OS. And fixing the embedded OS is very, very difficult. So that's the problem. So what's the solution, right? Solution is very simple. Whenever we build the product, we should bring the security architecture as a mentality. So there are a lot of standard security principles that already published. NIST is there, OAuth 10 principles are there, which is very new in our industry. I understand that. But I think the 3 main pillars that we can tackle is whenever we build the product, we talk about security architecture. When we build the product, when we release the product, even we just change one component in that hardware should go with a testing cycle. But that testing cycle is not a traditional testing cycle. The testing cycle should be the ethical hacking of that product itself. And the third one, and most important one, is identity and access management, which you just mentioned about access control. If you fix all these three problems, that's where you are going into the second layer, which is again the AI, and that's how you utilize it.
Yeah, I mean, what you just described, though, is that how does it move forward is that process is kind of a real back-end way of governance, of being able to secure it in a way that provides this to be controlled and qualified before it goes out, and consequently then secured with governance in this environment. Josh, are you looking at that within Ross?
Yeah, I think a lot of broadcast manufacturers are going back to the drawing board and asking customers what's important to them. This is kind of the first time ever we've taken this broadcast gear and made it jump through IT protocols and hurdles and hoops, right? So we're all trying to figure out exactly what's needed and what's best. We know that the product is resilient, right? But then how do we make sure it's flexible when it comes to what's needed, but also secure with IT protocols, right? So we're not the only ones. I know everyone is kind of listening because this is such a new vertical right now, right? So it feels like the great race to California right now when it's who's going to create the next best product, or at least who is thinking about the enterprise division when the next rollout of products comes.
And you're getting requests for this in the company.
Yeah, we see a lot. Whether it's connecting sites, whether it's pixel mapping, odd resolutions, IT protocols, things like that. There's a lot that the enterprise division is specifically asking for, and we're listening with open ears. We're very excited about it, and we've been lucky enough to have a host of products that already fit great into that puzzle piece.
So, looking at the quality of the videos that you had, Jaron, that's been up on that. Is that really the direction that everything is going? Is really high quality? 4K is given now. I mean, are you starting to see 8K?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that trend. So the first time, and this is actually what led us down to wanting to leverage IT infrastructure to begin with. This journey for us actually started over 10 years ago when we were building large displays actually for a casino that cared about quality for entertainment, but they also cared a lot about security. And so we looked at it kind of abstractly from a problem of, okay, we have thousands of these display devices that all need to be talking to each other. What other industries can we leverage that does this? And the IT departments do this all the time. You have thousands of computers that all need to talk to each other. Mm-hmm. So that was a natural step, and we kind of continued ourselves building upon that evolution. But what we see in a space like that JP Morgan building is that, yes, they're using it for art and it's absolutely beautiful. But one, the colors need to be better than you've ever seen because everybody has amazing displays in their pocket. And when you're in a physical space, you should be absolutely wowed. And so we want to power that kind of awe. The other thing on top of it is in that building, we didn't show any of the confidential boardrooms in there. But that building has the facility for 4,000 sources that can all be encrypted to show up on any display destination within the building. And that's a big deal. That needs to be hyper encrypted. The display devices themselves, after our processing, after our little chips that are inside of the LED tiles, that all has to be authenticated as an IT device, really all the way through the entire chain. And so I'm so excited about 2110 becoming such a great standard because it allows us to merge and kind of meld together broadcast and the security and authentication that IT brings, and it's really, really exciting for this.
So when you say that, it's like how many thousands of devices?
That particular building has a 60 terabit network with 4,000 sources.
Okay, so that's a secure environment within that building in and of itself. And what about that when it leaves there? Because obviously there are workers, executives that are in different places. They have to go through the whole vetting process as well with their devices, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything in there is authenticated. Our devices in particular are all embedded, but IT departments can go so far as to install SSL certificates, for example, into the embedded hardware so that it's all IT managed. And I think that's really the important factor for the security resiliency, is allowing the IT department to actually dictate what can show up where and what's allowed to be connected.
Now you're talking, now we're starting to step into, woo, this is an expensive proposition, it sounds like, to really create this and execute it. So the cost of it has to be exorbitant. Like, what's the rate of return on this? I mean, is this, like viable? Is this being looked upon as an expense for the company from a communication standpoint and staffing? Because it's certainly not something in broadcast where we're producing or we're capturing something live and we're pushing it out and it's supported whatever the model is surrounding that kind of content. What's the return on this? Have you been doing some investigation on ROI?
Well, when it comes to studios, corporate studios, we see that engagement tends to be the core of what they're looking for, right? Being able to engage customers, public facing, and then employees internally facing, to unify the messaging, to make sure that we have a well-oiled machine that's firing on all cylinders. Everyone has the same goal. We're all headed the same direction at the same time. ROI is sometimes tough to value, but I can tell you the executives know the cost of failed communications, and that is sometimes a terrible cost. We've worked with an organization that has about 120,000 employees globally. They did have a failed communication once, about a minute of dead air, and they told us it cost them millions of dollars. So.
The mistake or the
mistake, I should say, of the failed communication. Everything was in line, the event did not go as planned, and they were out millions of dollars. And then that could even trickle to a public-facing event, right? We don't want shareholders to hear about these failed communications. So it really is a mission-critical thing that we need to make sure happens correctly. But the ROI, the core of it, is just engagement, right? This is how these companies became who they are, is by getting the engagement of the public and their employees. And so being able to help communications, advance in that realm has been a big return for them.
So it's a big return. And what size of market are we talking about here? Are we talking in the billions as far as the potential for this to be executed? Unmesh, have you investigated that?
I think, according to me, the ROI is a little bit different. It's not about the money, but it's about the timing. That's how we measure the ROI.
What do you mean it's not about the money?
Yeah, so I will give an example. So video production studio, we basically record the CEO communication, for an example. That communication is so important. What's the turnaround time for that? Right? It doesn't really matter whether you are having a $10 million studio or $1 million studio. But if you cannot achieve that turnaround time with the leadership expectation, your ROI is not going to help the business. That is one point of view. And the second point of view is, if we are going to focus on money, then again, using a traditional IT ecosystem, all of our broadcast environment is so isolated that you cannot leverage location one broadcast hub to deliver the streaming or broadcast in other regional space. So you cannot utilize the resources in a different country. So if the CEO is basically recording a 15 minutes video in the studio in North America, for an example, but it's already end of the day. So you wanted to leverage resources from the Asia Pacific to get that video up and running. Now you're forcing the employee to sit here to do the post-production editing and deliver that video. So if you're going to solve that isolation problem into the scalability and leveraging the existing studio into multiple locations, that's how you usually measure your ROI in terms of not only money, but in terms of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and really, I'm kind of seeing this. Is this a nascent market at this time, or is it well into the growth curve that we're talking about here? Because all the elements we're discussing right at the moment are all really been thought out, and they're being developed right at the moment. But the goal of the overall category in the market is, broadcasting has had its challenges over the last 3 to 5 years as far as costs and viewers, and streaming is taking its toll, and everything's kind of had a hit. Is this just a fabricated environment, or is this a real market that is going to be looked at as the next generation and the next big thing, as it's been talked about? Jeremy, you're getting the calls.
Yeah, I think this is definitely the beginning of the hockey stick curve. We see more and more deployments across enterprise. I kind of bucket enterprise as anything that is going into a built fixed environment that's like a large multinational corporation, right? That needs to distribute information, distribute branding. et cetera. And so we're seeing everything from retail to corporate communications, all merging so much of this corporate communication into the IT departments. And it's becoming part of the normal culture that they're able to do more and more of this type of communication, both internally and externally, but also do it themselves. So like, very quick example, one of the massive displays that we saw in that video, JP Morgan hosted an interview panel one day ahead of the SpaceX IPO, right? So thinking about ROI, first of all, they have the ability to do that in-house themselves, right? Rather than needing to go into some type of special place and rent it for a week and build sets and scenery and all these things. But on top of that, the fact that they're able to control the environment with the security and understand what's happening with the display and know that, yes, that's a decimal place, not a broken pixel, is hyper important, and everybody is jumping onto leveraging that tech.
You know, that's a really key point to me, is everybody's jumping on it because, you know, it's an opportunity. However, there are certain companies that have in-depth experience in providing this kind of build. You know, we have, you know, one of our hosts here, Dave Van Hoy with ASG, they've been building this out for some time for studios, so now this is a natural migration for them. Same thing with Jamie this morning with Lau. You know, these are it's a simplified effort that it now works at such a degree, a level, that this can be implemented versus having massive staffing requirements that are required.
I would say that's 100% correct, and what's exciting is that everybody that knows how to integrate broadcast in 2110 is fantastic at these types of integrations, because you need somebody that knows how broadcast works and what resiliency level it needs, as opposed to bringing in the team that like hangs a $3,000 projector and shines it on the wall. So it's a natural kind of way of slotting into the into this part of the market.
So foundational capabilities and understanding of how to implement something like this to whatever the need is going to be critical to help this grow. And not just, you know, new technologies or startups that kind of go on this. So
100%.
It's really key. You know, with that, each one of these folks here at this table, you know, on our panel here, can make this happen and help you if you have any more questions of what we're talking about. And maybe that's just it. Are there any questions that someone might have? One question. Oh boy, Robin says. Okay, just shout it out.
I can take that. I can take that question. So I think the answer is very simple. Most of the corporation, they go with either approach one, which is asking a vendor to basically send some kind of like a loaner devices, and then, you know, the client can perform the pen test. But if we go with this approach, the problem is you're wasting a lot of time, and that will result into the cost, because now you're going to create the whole delay in the deployment. Shipping the hardware, then you need to train someone to basically like create that hardware ecosystem so that you can train the IT team to perform the penetration testing. And that testing is not like 1 hour or 2 hour testing, it's like 2 to 3 weeks of testing. Then it usually do the peer review and everything, right? So the other approach that we are basically pushing a lot of vendors is the internal team who are performing the pen test, the vendor can still partner with the third party agency, which are following the standard basically. So if the vendor, when they develop their product, either they can create their own in-house security team to perform this type of testing with like a proper certification, or they can work with the third-party agency, get the certification, and ask a client, okay, here is a certification, here is the report. If the client accepts the report, guess what? You are saving a 1 month of time, and then just like shipping your hardware directly to the project. So,
you know, and to that point, you know, each one of these are experts. And so if there's any questions, and that's what makes these kinds of gatherings and events really opportunistic. If you have any questions in regards to what we're talking about, come on up and talk to us. Talk to us. We're implementing this kind of solution out in the marketplace. And with that, I'd like to thank each of you for being part of our panel today and really discussing obviously we could keep on going, but in this particular case, I need to thank you. And so thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.